I would like to start this video out with a disclaimer for those who clearly don't understand the concept of a generalization. This video is not a judgment on all rich people or all poor people. I know there are generous and good people of wealth, and I know that there are selfless, humble, impoverished people. This video is not about them. It's about entitled individuals. On April 20th, 2010, an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico exploded and killed 11 workers and caused the worst oil spill in U.S. history. As much as 800,000 gallons or 3 million liters of oil a day poured into the Gulf off the coast of Louisiana, threatening fisheries, wildlife, and beaches along the coastline that stretches to Florida. This was a disaster of epic proportion. But when interviewed about the tragedy, BP CEO Tony Hayward responded by complaining about how inconvenient this all was. He even said the word, "I just want to get my life back." His sense of entitlement was extreme. He was worried about missing his vacation that he had planned for. He was worried about not getting to spend time with his children and all the other inconveniences of having to deal with this natural disaster that his company caused. He wasn't worried about his 11 dead employees. He wasn't worried about the people that might starve because of the broken fisheries, or the people that would go broke and lose their livelihoods, or the natural disaster. He was worried about himself. If you take a moment and look around the world today, especially in Western society, you will see a vast uptick in people with this fantastically unrealistic expectation. An expectation that they deserve special treatment or privileges without earning them, that they are special among all humanity because they are themselves, and we must all cater to them, their feelings, and their needs. The selfish nature of our society has started to breed people who lack empathy and who struggle to consider the needs and perspectives of others. Focusing solely on their own desires, these people are selfish to the extreme. They blame others and refuse to take responsibility for their own actions, shortcomings, or failures. These are the falsely entitled. And these falsely entitled are destroying our world. Now, when I say they are destroying the world, I mean the falsely entitled are causing irreparable harm to society's foundations. The foundations of a functional society encompass various elements that contribute to its well-being and stability. One of the things that is eroding is the rule of law. A functional society is based on the principle that all individuals and all institutions are subject to and accountable under the law. This ensures equality, fairness, and protection of rights for all members of the society. But the falsely entitled don't see it that way. They seek this special treatment based on who they think they are or what they even believe in. There are two classes within our society who have this victim mindset of false entitlement. Many of the supremely rich and many of the perpetually poor. Great communities need social cohesion, strong social bonds, mutual trust, and a sense of shared identity among the community members. These are essential for a functional society, but the entitled do not promote cooperation, empathy, or a collective action towards any common goals. If you are rich and you're entitled, you most likely trust no one. No one who isn't a sycophant, that is. The rich and entitled keep yes persons and hangers on, from whom they feed their delusions of personal oppression. Take the owner of the Colts, Jim Irsay, who was intoxicated and high and was pulled over by the police and said that he was being harassed because the most oppressed people in society today are rich old white billionaires. The rich and entitled will surround themselves with other entitled wealthy people who feel the same as they do. And then they will all complain about how the issues of wealth are not understood by the great unwashed masses, about how it is them who rule the world and carry that massive responsibility, and how no one understands them. They will go to their therapists and they will complain about how their wealth is terrible. But will they give that wealth up? Never. To the entitled rich common goals mean little to nothing. Only increasing their wealth and their status is all that matters. The community exists to provide for them, to provide them with workers, resources, and the luxuries that they enjoy. Now let's talk about the entitled poor. The first question you might ask while watching this video is, how can the poor feel entitled? Or aren't they entitled to something since they're poor? Well, let me tell you about the entitled poor. And again, I'm not speaking about all poor, just like I wasn't speaking about all rich. I'm talking about the falsely entitled poor. And I'm willing to wager some of you have met these people. The entitled poor trust no one because they see everyone as part of a giant machine that has oppressed them. They surround themselves with other impoverished people who feel the same, and they seek community within other victim mindseted people such as themselves. They'll sit around and complain about how the issues of their poverty is not understood by the middle class or the wealthy. To the entitled poor, common community goals mean little to nothing. And like I said, they share this in common with the entitled rich. Because for the entitled rich, increasing their already sizable wealth and status are all that matter. For the entitled poor, getting wealth and status are all that matter. The communities exist for both these groups only to provide for them. If you are poor and entitled, then you lack any trust in the system or society because you see everyone as part of a machine that is holding you down. The entitled poor will often fall into committing crimes on their fellow impoverished individuals and justifying their actions by saying, this is just what I have to do to get by. Just like the rich will often engage in various white-collar crimes, stealing and getting by because they justify it as that's what everyone else is doing. The rich and the entitled poor see the community as a resource to be pumped and pumped and pumped for more money, more influence, and more status. It's just that the entitled rich are better at extracting wealth out of the situation than the entitled poor. But they're doing the same thing, just on two different levels and two different cultures. False entitlement leads individuals to manipulate situations or others just to get what they want, disregarding the impact that it ever has on anybody else. All entitled people have a great difficulty handling criticism. Those with false entitlement will react negatively to feedback, perceiving it as a personal attack and becoming defensive. The rich entitled person will say, do you know who I am? The poor entitled person will say, do you know what's happened to me? False entitlement gives you the phony belief that you are inherently deserving of a certain privilege or special treatments based off of who you are. They believe they are owed and that some other force, entity, or organization is responsible for making them whole in some fashion. Now here comes my disclaimer that I have to put again in so many videos because people don't understand how to think anymore. Again, I'm not saying all poor people are selfish and entitled. Not at all. Not by a long shot. I'm only speaking to the falsely entitled poor people. We all know them. We all have them as friends or as family members and sometimes as employees. Take that uncle or cousin who's always lived with their grandma, never had a job, and steals her pills. When he sees you, he always wants to borrow $20, but none of it is ever his fault. Life's always giving him a raw deal, even though he's never once tried to improve himself, get a real job, or to do better with his life. That's the entitled poor I'm speaking of. I'm not saying that there aren't any entitled middle class people. They exist too. It's just in this video, I'm comparing the differences between the extremes of false entitlement between the haves and the false entitlement of the have-nots. How these two seemingly very different and distinct groups can carry through life with the same bad attitude and victim mindset. Our world is plagued by false entitlement. Entitlement has become its own religion in the United States. Everyone feels entitled. They feel entitled in every way and in every form and in every fashion. Even in politics, both sides feel entitled to do what they feel is right for everyone else. Social media and a lack of meaning in people's lives have fostered this false entitlement that now pervades us. Dealing with a selfish and entitled person is so challenging. But it's important to approach the situation with strength and resolve. Like in everything we talk about on this channel of wisdom, you have to set clear boundaries and you have to clearly communicate with them. You got to let these people know that their behavior is unacceptable and won't be tolerated. You have to be assertive with the falsely entitled. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to avoid enabling them and refrain from giving in to their petty demands or allowing their behavior to go unchecked. By not reinforcing their false entitlement, you can help them understand that their actions have consequences. This is something they didn't learn as little kids because they were indulged. And lastly, I want to say, just because the world is filled with falsely entitled people doesn't mean that there aren't actually people who are entitled to a little special treatment. People who have been through the ringer or victims of actual crimes. People who have actually been wronged. Ironically, usually it's these people who are the least entitled in spirit and mind. They humbly shoulder their burdens without much complaint and with little ceremony. This is called honor, and those people are to be honored, and they are to be shown the validation and love that these falsely entitled people think that they are entitled to. Think of the soldier who has lost his limb in defense of his nation. He asks for nothing but respect. Think of a single mom taking care of several kids after the husband has ran out, but she has 2 jobs and she's barely making it work. But she asks for nothing. My advice is reserve your tears for those who are truly suffering and do not waste time on people who falsely cry out, "I am being done wrong." Thank you for listening and have a wise day.